Confederate cent and its various restrikes. Can you go to the next slide, Maria? But back when the Confederacy was starting a new country, I mean, when you're becoming a new country, one of the things that you need is your own coinage. Now, there are no written records of this, but it was believed that either the Confederacy or a friend of the Confederacy or an agent of the Confederacy contacted Robert Lovett Jr. in Philadelphia to create a 1-cent piece for them. You got to start somewhere, so they figured they'd start with a penny. And as the story goes, Robert Lovett did create a die for the Confederate cent, and he struck somewhere between 12 to 16 of these coins, but they were never delivered to the Confederacy. There were a number of reasons why they think these were never delivered, and I'll get into that in a moment. But no coins issued during the war. In 1874, the die and the coins ended up with John Hazeltine, who was a kind of creative coin collector in his day. This was all in Philadelphia. Apparently Hazeltine had quite a few friends in the mint who were able to produce some interesting pattern pieces for him. And then, well, why don't we start the slide here?
We can't see very well on this side. Yeah. Okay.
So here we have the United States. In 1861, as the states started breaking off to form the Confederate States of America, you can see how the Confederacy formed state by state as they succeeded from the Union. April of '61 was the first battle of the Civil War. That's where Arizona came from. And then we have the states as they later get readmitted. Why don't we move on to the next slide? But this is one of the reasons why they think that the cent was never delivered, or the dies were never delivered to the Confederacy. Robert Lovett Jr. created quite a number of what were called store cards in his day, or these tokens. And he made one for the Marshall House, and it had on the obverse a design which very distinctively was Robert Lovett's. And unfortunately, this was from 1859, a couple of years before the war. The Marshall House, even Jerry Mull doesn't know this one, Elmer Ellsworth was the very first Union casualty of the Civil War, and he was shot at the Marshall House taking down a Confederate banner. So one part of the thinking why he never delivered the dies was because his cent, the Confederate cent, had that same design on it. Everybody knew that Lovett did this, and him producing a Confederate coin using the Marshall House design, it's almost like sticking it in the face of the Union, saying, you know, this is where the war began, so this is where we're going to make the cent to sort of commemorate what happened at the Marshall House. Next slide. And also, while he was well known for that design, it wasn't an original design. He copied this from the French centime. And going back to the 1840s, there was a French piece which I guess he was apparently inspired by and modified that design over time to come up with the 1861 Confederate design. Next. So this is what the original Confederate cent looked like. It was struck in copper nickel, 88% copper, 12% nickel, the same composition as the 1861 Indian head penny. And again, there were somewhere between 12 to 16 of these that were struck. And on the back, we have his initial there, Lovett. We have a cotton bale. We have corn, tobacco, wheat, a lot of the agricultural things that the South was known for. Next. If you have one of these, they're worth a lot of money. This was one that sold recently. You can see they go well into the low six figures. Next. So Lovett, born in Philadelphia. Another reason why he may not have delivered the dies to the Confederacy was that Lincoln said anyone caught dealing with the Confederacy will be hung as a traitor. So that might have encouraged him to take the die in the sense and bury them in his basement. There was also a question about his wife being concerned for his personal safety, but whatever the reason was, the die was never delivered to the Confederacy. Next. Bailey and Company was in Philadelphia where Lovett worked. Next. So fast forward to 1873. While Lovett buried most of the coins, he kept one as a pocket piece. Apparently he was a bit of a drinker, and the story goes that in 1873 he was in a bar and spent his pocket piece Confederate cent. Well, the barkeep, Thomas Funston, he recognized the design. He took it to John Hazeltine. Hazeltine then went to Lovett and said, you know, what's going on here? And while Lovett initially denied any knowledge of it, he figured they're not hanging anyone anymore for dealing with the Confederacy, so he did come clean and he sold his dies to John Hazeltine. Next. Now Hazeltine, as I said, being a very creative individual, he started making restrikes. And he struck, it was the exact same coin, but he did it in different metals. Next. He did 7 in gold, 12 in silver. He was doing his 55th strike in copper when the die broke. So in 1874, he made 74 restrikes. And today, these restrikes, depending on condition and metal, are in the tens to many tens of thousands of dollars. Now we fast forward to 1961, Robert Bashlow, another kind of creative coin dealer, he got a hold of the dies. And at this point, the dies, they were broken. The back of the dies had been worked over pretty well with a chisel. The front had been hit with a hammer. There were rust spots on them. But he made a transfer die from the original die, and he started making restrikes. So you can see where it's been chiseled in the back, where it's been hammered in the front. The two that I have with me tonight are both these Bashlow restrikes. Next. And he did 20,000 in copper. This was 1961, the 100th anniversary of the Civil War. 5,000 in what he called goldine, which sounds better than brass, but they were brass. 5,000 silver. Then he got creative: nickel, silver, lead, aluminum, tin, zinc, plastic, and supposedly 3 each in gold and platinum. A story about when his grave site was restored, and they put on the grave replicas of the Confederate cent that he engraved. Next. So 1861, Robert Lovett made the dies. 1874, they went to John Hazeltine. And then there were actually a number of famous owners along the way. 1885, the Chapman brothers. In 1899, went to Judson Brenner. 1919, Virgil Brand, when he died, went to his brother Horace, who sold them to John J. Ford Jr. in 1954. Who in 1961, Hugh David Bowers, who didn't hang on to them long, sold them to Bashlow. And then after Bashlow finished with his restrikes, he donated the dies to the Smithsonian. And here's a picture of the original dies that were donated to the Smithsonian.
Were those the reconstructed dies that he donated?
These are the original, what says here, original dies made by Robert Lovett. So I believe he donated both the Lovett dies and the Bashlow dyes. Went to the Smithsonian, figured that was the end of the Restrikes. Next. But not so fast. In 2011, the Smithsonian decided to make a restrike. They came up with a set of 4. It was gold, silver, platinum, and copper. They were graded, they were not graded, they were slabbed by NGC. I think it was a real nice piece for them to be selling in their gift shop. Next. You can see it's got an NGC holder. It has restrike in parentheses because it was not really a restrike. And while it does say gem proof, because they're not really a coin, they didn't have a numeric grade on the Smithsonian restrikes. Can you go back one? Mm-hmm. And then also on the back you can see it says SI for Smithsonian Institution, still has the L for Lovett. If you were to crack one of these open, nobody's going to confuse them with a Hazeltine restrike or an original strike or a Bashlow restrike. They're almost bullion pieces. Next. So that's the story of the Confederate cent, and then again the Hazeltine restrike, the Bashlow restrike. The Bashlows have kind of come into their own as collectible. NGC started grading and slabbing them a few years back. They have a population in the hundreds. Then PCGS got into the act. They also grade them and slab them. They have a population in the dozens. But depending on the metal and the condition, you see these on eBay anywhere from under $100 to as much as $500. And I'd be glad to entertain any questions that anyone might have about the Confederate cent. If not, question.
Well, I have a question. Now the Confederates at the beginning, they were willing to go north and get their stuff done. For example, the Montgomery banknotes were done by the National Banknote Company in New York. But who was Lovett? Why would they approach this guy who was a...
Well, I don't know if many people in the South were doing dyes.
They must have had somebody. Well, I guess they didn't.
I guess they didn't.
Yeah.
I always sort of thought that Lovett sort of cooked them up as a fantasy piece and concocted the story.
Dr. E?
So I'm gathering that there never was an actual circulating coin in the South.
There never was an actual... after Lovett made the dye, he buried the dye in his basement, so they were never delivered to the South. The only one that ever circulated was the one pocket piece that he spent in the bar that drunken night.
They did have currency.
Oh, they had lots of paper money.
And they must have had Spanish coinage. What else?
Well, they had a $50. If you remember when they captured the mint in New Orleans, there were a bunch of $50 there, and they shaved off the back of the U.S. $50 and put on a Confederate $50. When they struck them, it kind of flattened out the front, but they did have a few $50 and then quite a lot of foreign currencies. As you probably know, during the Civil War, even in the North, you couldn't find any coins, which is why we had the Civil War tokens, the encased postage. So the South wasn't alone in not having any coinage.
Well, then they must have had somebody who had the capability of making dyes through the New Orleans.
But they didn't have the bullion.
Maybe.
Because I know they did strikings in New Orleans.
But New Orleans didn't make the dyes. Philadelphia made all the dyes for all events.
But the Confederates changed.
Yeah, they
the
may have had
dyes.
some
Somebody
engraver,
must
yeah.
have made the back of the die or the reverse of the
Yeah.
die. Maybe it was England, I don't know.
Great topic if somebody wants to research that and give a talk on it about the Confederate $50. If none others, this is where we normally applaud.
All right,